Ruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem. Shem Yearning For All, Mrs. Boston. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's shir from Rav Glatstein Shlita. I'd like to give Yesh Kayach, the exclusive sponsor of tonight's shir. Leilin Neshamois, Gershon Yosef ben Ramzev, Yeshua ben Yitzchok, Yitzchok ben Yeshua, Yosef Yitzchok ben Rav Yisrael, David ben Shlomo, Shlomo ben Moshe, Baruch Yaakov Yisrael ben Chaim Uri, Chaim Uri ben Yaakov Yisrael, Chaya bas Gershon Yosef, Yenta bas Meir, Sima Esther bas Chaim HaKoyin, Rivka Miriam bas Chaim Yitzchok, Yita Mindel bas David, Yechevet bas Chaim Yitzchok, Baruch Amir bas Chaim Yitzchok, Yecheskel David ben Yaakov Tzvi, and the Rosh Zelig ben Rav Avigdor, Mimishpachas Wolf. Finish the same Tzuruis B'Tzara Chaim. Tonight we have the covered have with us once again Rav Glatstein Shlita, Rav Tiferes Mordechai, Cedarhurst, speaker Yearning For Geula all day. Whoever had the great schus of sponsoring one of the other shiurim or putting an ad in the dinner journal, which will be in a few short weeks in honor of Yearning For All's annual dinner to Mechazik the Abotzas HaTorah of Yearning For All worldwide throughout the year. Call 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. So we have the special opportunity to have the new sefer from Rav Glatstein just came out. It's a piece of the Yeshua. It's available on the back table after the shir. So I covered the calling of Rav Glatstein for tonight's drasha. But Bold would like to say a few words about the sefer.
I had to my Yedid Rabbi Deutsch. This sefer, it's a piece of Yeshua, just came out. We scheduled the shir especially now. It was supposed to be in the beginning of the summer because we wanted to have opportunity for everybody to buy the sefer. We know when a person needs the Yeshua, we daven every day. So the result Tzaddik and the Chaim Betal brings down that a person could put his Yeshua in Hashem's Yeshua and get a Yeshua. So today, by getting the sefer, it's a piece of Yeshua. Everybody needs Yeshuas. I encourage everyone to take one sefer home as a shmira. A new sefer, the Heilige Chofetz Chaim made a small kuntres on Tzipis Yeshua. This is translated word for word with many things about Mashiach and about your own Yeshuas. And this is a schus for us to bring the Geula b'mheira. Rabbi Glatstein, please.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Bold, for the introduction. Thank you, Rabbi Deutsch. Actually, Rabbi Bold, I think that was like Begeder Ruach HaKodesh, because tonight already is Hey Av. Tonight is the Yartzeit of the Arizal. So let's begin with Divrei HaArizal on the Yoima, the Hilula of the Arizal. Today was actually the Hilula of the Rambam Panoi. It's very interesting. You have 3 days in a row in Chodesh Av of the great Mekubalim. You have Gimel, Rav Shamshin of Ashtrapol. You have Daled Rambam Panoi. You have Hey the Arizal. And Beis, when I was in Eretz Yisrael, there's Chus to meet one of the greatest Mekubalim of our generation, Rav Shroya Devlitsky. So he was nifter amazingly on Beis Av. Actually, when we came in, everybody wanted to take pictures of him. He let everybody take pictures of him. He would not let me take a picture of him. I don't know, he didn't let me take a picture of him. But he let me kiss his hand. No one else was allowed to kiss his hand. I can't explain the significance of that encounter. The Arizal says, we know that La'achar Me'ah ve'esrim Shana, the Gemara tells us in Shabbos and Daf Lamed Aleph, Amar Rava. Now this is very interesting, because Rava was an Amoira. Rava was not a Tana. Rava was not a Navi. Even if Rava was a Navi, we would be entitled to ask, Ein Navi Rashoy L'chadesh Davar. Navi can't be Mechadesh something new. So if Rava is telling us what the 6 questions were going to be asked La'achar Me'ah ve'esrim Shana, this cannot be the Chidush of Rava. It has to be, it's in the Torah, it's in the Psukim. Otherwise Rava would have no right to bring this out. Even a Navi couldn't be Mechadesh. Rava says, La'achar Me'ah ve'esrim Shana, a person will be asked 6 questions. Nasasa v'nasata be'emuna, Kavati itim la Torah, Asakta b'piri v'rivya. But one of the 6 questions is, Tzipisa li-Yeshua. So let's begin tonight with Divrei Ha'ari. The Arizal writes in Shar HaKavonos that after 120, when a Yid is going to be faced with the question, Nu tzipisa li-Yeshua, did you await the coming of Mashiach? Where is the designated spot in our lives to be Mekayim this great Inyan? The Ari reveals it's when we say the words Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayom. At this point, when I was a bacher, I grew up here in Flatbush on Emin 31st, and I used to walk to Rav Avigdor Miller on what S in Ocean Parkway. It was quite a walk. R in Ocean Parkway. A little shorter. R in Ocean Parkway. Thank you. And on Rosh Chodesh, sometimes people, not in Boston, not in Flatbush, but in other communities, it happens, and that's why there's a siman in Shulchan Aruch. Sometimes people forget Yalav Yavai. It happens. It could happen. There's a whole siman in Shulchan Aruch. What do you do if you forget Yalav Yavai? So Rav Miller would take a big chunk of keys, he would put it in the siddur by Yalav Yavai. This way you don't forget it. Sometimes even if you do that, you're davening, and you say, what are these keys doing here by Ritzeh? It takes a minute to realize, it's Rosh Chodesh. Really, we should take another stack of keys and put it by the bracha, Es Tzemach David Avdecha Mehera Satzmiach. It might be the most important bracha that we say every day, because in this bracha we have the opportunity to mekayim the inyan of Tzipisa Yeshua. This year is a very significant year, because the way the calendar was arranged, the calendar this year is exactly parallel to the year that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. See, I already gave away part of the answer. But does anybody know what day of the week was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed? Okay, you have 8 choices. Say 8? Very good. Was it Sunday? Was it Monday? No, Tuesday? This is a rhetorical question. If you know the answer, you gotta... I should accept his answer immediately. When was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed? The Gemara tells us in Tainus that the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed Matzai Shabbos, B'chein B'shniya. Likewise, the second Beis HaMikdash. The Maral writes in the Netzach Yisrael that Dvarim Gedolim Einam B'mikra. Great things are never coincidental. If the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed on Matzah Shabbos, both the first time and the second time, it must be that it had to be destroyed Matzah Shabbos. Indeed, the Maral says the only opportunity for the Beis HaMikdash to be destroyed is Matzah Shabbos. Why? Says Maral, any time during the week that you're headed toward Shabbos, you cannot have Churban Beis HaMikdash. The problem is, we're always headed to Shabbos. Hayom Yom Rishon b'Shabbos. Hayom Yom Sheni b'Shabbos. Hayom Yom Shlishi b'Shabbos. There's only one little window of time that we're not headed to Shabbos. You know the only time we're not headed to Shabbos? Matzai Shabbos. Says Maral, Shabbos and the Beis HaMikdash are synonymous. They're parallel concepts. This is based on the principle called Ashan. Olam, Shana, Nefesh, which means there are places in the world and times that are parallel to each other. There are places that correspond to various times. So for instance, what the Beis HaMikdash is in place, Shabbos is in time. So the Beis HaMikdash is, so to speak, the Shabbos of the world. Shabbos is the Beis HaMikdash of the week. You ever notice? Every night in Marav we say, Ushmart Seisenu, Uvayenu, L'chaim, L'shalom, Eyata, V'yad Olam, Baruch Atah Hashem, Shomer, Amo, Yisrael, Load. Comes Friday night, Ushmart Seisenu, Uvayenu, L'chaim, L'shalom, Eyata, V'yad Olam, Ufrois, Olenu, Sukkah Shloimecha. Hapoire Sukkah Shalom Olenu, V'yal Kol Amo, Yisrael, V'yal Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, Man Dachar Shmei Yerushalayim. Why are we talking about Yerushalayim Friday night? There's an idea that what Yerushalayim is in place, Shabbos is in time. So let's illustrate this as follows. Reb Shlomo Alkabetz wrote a piyut that's recited pretty much throughout Klal Yisrael, that this is the central piyut that we say to be Makabel the Shabbos. L'chadoidi l'kras kala p'nei Shabbos nekabla. It has 10 stanzas. If you were to ask yourself, what do you think this piyut is about? Ask another yid, what is this piyut about? They would all say, it must be about Shabbos. The thing is, if you actually study the piyut, it ruba de ruba has nothing to do with Shabbos. After the first 2 stanzas, Chadoidi, Shamrav Zachar, Likras Shabbos, all of a sudden, we're not talking about Shabbos at all. Mikdash Melech Yer Melucha is about rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash. Hisnari Me'afar Kumi is about restoring the Malchus Beis David. Hisoyuri, Hisoyuri. We say, Uri, Uri, wake up, wake up. That's about restoring Nevuah. Loi Sevoishi is about the expansion of Yerushalayim. Could somebody please explain why we're waiting the whole week to greet the Shabbos? We come to the pinnacle of Kabbalah Shabbos, and we say a piyut that pretty much has nothing to do with Shabbos at all. It's all about Beis HaMikdash, Nevuah, Malchus Beis David. Why are we talking about these things Friday night? Says Hagoyin Rav Moshe Shapiro, and he writes something that is not typical of something he would write. He says, what I'm saying now is halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa. You know, his svarim are sifrei machshava, so it's usually not halacha l'maisa. The same way the Ari says, the designated juncture of time to be mitzapel Yeshua is when you say the bracha, es tzemach David, but there is a time during the week that is designated to be mitzapel Yeshua. If the Gemara tells us that the Beis HaMikdash had to be destroyed Matzah Shabbos, because only if you're moving away from Shabbos can you have Churban Beis HaMikdash, which means if moving away toward Shabbos is designated for Churban, that means headed to Shabbos is designated for Binyan Beis HaMikdash. So, if there would be a juncture of time that is designated to be Mitzapel Yeshua, it would have to be in the moments that we put aside to be Makabel Shabbos. So indeed, says Rav Moshe Shapiro, the purpose of Kabbalah Shabbos is to be Mekayim the Inyan of Tzipisa Yeshua. So just after you say, L'chadoidi l'kras kala, Shamra v'zachar b'dibur echad, l'kras Shabbos chuvanelcha, now we're ready to segue into what we call the parallel of Shabbos. What's synonymous with Shabbos? What's synonymous with Shabbos? Yerushalayim, the Beis HaMikdash. So we say, Mikdash Melech, sanctuary of the king, Ir Melucha, royal city, Kumi Tzii Mitoicha Afecha, rise up from the ashes. Ravloch Sheves Be'emakabacha, you've dwelt enough in the valley of weeping. Then we go to Hisnari. What's Hisnari about? Hisnari is about the restoration of the Malchus Beis David. The Medrash tells us that when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, so Tzidkiyahu HaMelech was captured, and Chazal severely criticized Tzidkiyahu HaMelech because he was the last of the scions of the Malchus Beis David, and he allowed himself, so to speak, to fall into the hand of the enemy. Chazal say he should have taken the head of the enemy and smashed it on the floor. But that was, so to speak, in a way, the end of the Malchus Beis David for then. So we're mispalel that now that we're yearning for the Geula, may Hashem restore the Malchus Beis David. Al Yad ben Yishai Beis Halachmi. But there was another thing that was lost with the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara says, Miyayim Shachara Beis HaMikdash Nitla Nevuah Min HaNeviim. Prophecy was taken away from the prophets. So as we're yearning for the Geula, as we're being mitzapeh for the Yeshua, we're also being mispalel that Hashem should restore the institution of Nevuah. Uri, Uri. What do the words Uri, Uri mean? Uri means, they comes from Shiras Devaira, where Devaira is speaking to herself. She's saying, awaken Devaira, awaken Devaira. She's stirring herself to Nevuah. Then we say, with the coming of the Geula, the Rebbeinu Shalom will expand. The Rebbeinu Shalom will expand Yerushalayim. Loi sevoishi, v'loi sikalmi, yamin usmail. I don't know if they know this in Syria yet, but Chazal say, Asid Yerushalayim le'esrachev ad Damesek. Yerushalayim will expand all the way to Damascus. So we say, Rebbeinu Shalom, expand Yerushalayim, yamin usmail tifroitzi. And then we go back and we greet the Shabbos, Boi v'shalom, which means part of greeting the Shabbos, part of being Makabel the Shabbos, is awaiting and yearning for the Geula. The designated time to be Mitzapel Yeshua is L'chadoidi, written by Reb Shlomo Al-Kabetz. So we have a few junctures that we've identified off the bat. Es Tzemach David, Kabbalah Shabbos. So like we mentioned, this year the calendar is such that the same way the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed on Matzah Shabbos, this year Tisha B'Av comes out on Matzah Shabbos. But let's go back to the beginning. Rava says that after 120 years, we're going to be asked 6 questions. We have the right to ask, where in the world did Rava get this from? Rava was an Amayra. He's not a Tana. He's not a Navi. And even if Rava was a Navi, we would be allowed to ask, how does Rava know that one of the 6 things we're going to be asked after 120 is Tzipisha Yeshua? After all, it's not even one of the 613 mitzvahs, is it? Is Tzipiyah Yeshua one of the 613 mitzvahs? Does it say anywhere in the Chumash you have to be Mitzapeh Yeshua? Where did Rava even come up with this idea? It doesn't say that after 120 you're going to be asked, did you put on tefillin every day? That's not one of the questions. You're going to have to answer in the affirmative to that, but that's not one of the big 6 questions. They're not going to ask, did you keep Shabbos? They're not going to ask, did you keep kosher? Rava said you could boil it down to 6 things. And one of them is not even in the Chumash? Where does this come from? So I want to share with you 2 approaches. The first approach, we have to understand simple words of the Rambam. Many people after davening, they recite something called the Yud Gimel Ani Mamens. There's also an idea the Rambam formulated Yud Gimel Ikrim. This is not the time and place, but there's a big question. Are there Yud Gimel Ikrim in Yiddishkeit? Are there Yud? Well, the Rambam wrote Yud Gimel Ikrim, did he? Does it mean something? Is there an idea of Yud Gimel Ikrim? Shabbos is not in the Yud Gimel Ikrim. Where do these Yud Gimel Ikrim come from? In fact, Reb Chaim Brisker would say, Reb Chaim asked, what do you mean Yud Gimel Ikrim? Let's say somebody says, I don't believe in the pasuk va'achos loitan timna. They're not bikairos. What if somebody doesn't believe in one ois in the Torah? They're not bikairos. So what exactly is an ikr? What's the meaning of an ikr? So Reb Chaim famously says, the difference between an ikr and a mitzvah is if somebody didn't have the benefit of a Jewish education. So if you have a guy, you say, Rabbi, why don't you put on tefillin? What's tefillin? I never heard of tefillin. You never heard of tefillin? Nah, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. I never heard of tefillin. Really? I should wear tefillin? Maybe one day I'll wear tefillin. A guy who doesn't wear tefillin because he never learned about tefillin is not an apikairos. The reason he doesn't do it is he doesn't know about it. He's nebuch, unlearned. But what if somebody does not believe in these Yud Gimel Ikrim because they never learnt about it, to no fault of their own? Reb Chaim Brisker famously says, Nebuch and apikairos is oichet and apikairos. If nebuch, somebody didn't learn about the Yud Gimel Ikrim to no fault of his own, unfortunately we cannot consider him a believing Jew. If he doesn't know about tzitzis, because to no fault of his own. If he doesn't know about Shabbos, he could be considered b'chlal amisecha. If he doesn't know the Yud Gimel Ikrim, he's einoi b'chlal amisecha. That's Reb Chaim Shlita. That's the simple reading of the Rambam. The Chassam Sofer rejects this understanding of the Rambam. Chassam Sofer writes in a tshuva, there is no such thing as Yud Gimel Ikrim. There is no status of Yud Gimel Ikrim. Every ois, every word of Torah is shakol. You have to be mamin in every ois. There's no difference between the Bias HaMashiach and Va'achos Loitan Timna. The Abarbanel also writes, there is no halachic concept of Yud Gimel Ikrim. The Abarbanel says if there were Yud Gimel Ikrim, then you could be sure they would be in the Aseres Hadibros. The Abarbanel says if there were Yud Gimel Ikrim, then they would be in Shas. Did you ever see one word about Yud Gimel Ikrim in Shas? The whole concept is not spoken about. That's because, says Abarbanel, it doesn't exist. The Rambam only wrote Yud Gimel Ikrim for beginners to try to initiate them into basic concepts, but there's no specific status of Yud Gimel Ikrim. But let's take it at face value tonight. The Rambam wrote the following words: Ani mamin be'emunah shlema, bevias HaMashiach. I believe in complete faith in the coming of Mashiach. V'yaf al pi sheyismameya, and even though he tarries, im kol zeh, nevertheless, achak eloi, I wait for him b'chol yom sheyavai. You ever hear that? Should we sing some of the songs? Anybody want to volunteer? Any volunteers for a good nigun for Ani Mamin? I don't know if that's within the purview of the policies of Irgun Shirei Torah. Do they let people come up and sing nigunim? No, I'm joking. Okay. Ani Mamin, they know about this, right? They told me in Flatbush they heard about the Ani Mamin be'emunah shalema b'vias HaMashiach. Comes the Brisker Rav, and the Brisker Rav asks the following amazing question on the Rambam. The Brisker Rav says the Rambam is not a Tosfos. The Rambam is a halachist. He's a posek. The Rambam asks no questions and he gives no answers. The Rambam doesn't say Tema v'yesh loymar v'yafal gav mikol makom. The Rambam just tells you mutter aser l'chatchila b'diavad, yes, no. All of a sudden, when it comes to Mashiach, the Rambam became like Rabbeinu Tam. V'im toimar, where is the Mashiach? I believe in him. Where did he go? V'yafal pisha yismameya. Enter the Rambam. Im kol zeh achak aloi b'chol yom sheyavai. I don't know where he is, but I'm still waiting for him. You hear the Rambam's kasha and teretz? The kasha is, really? You believe in Mashiach? So where is he? The answer is, I don't know, but I'm still waiting for him. Ask the Brisker Rav, since when did the Rambam become one of the Balei HaTosfos? And if the Rambam formulates Ani Mamins this way, why didn't the Rambam ask a kasha? Ani Mamin be'emunah shalema shaboire yisbarach shemai einoi guf. I believe in complete faith that the Almighty doesn't have physical characteristics. Why didn't the Rambam say v'afal pi d'chsiv einei Hashem yad Hashem mikol makom dibra Torah kalashim b'nei Adam? Or why didn't the Rambam ask Ani Mamin be'emunah shalema shaboire yisbarach shemai who noisein sachar tov la'osei ritzaynai v'im toimar v'hat sadik v'raloi? And then the Rambam can answer mikol makom al pi roiv hu al pi midas mishpat. The Rambam asks no questions and he gives no answers. Why, when it comes to Mashiach, the Rambam has a kasha? Where'd he go? And the answer is, I'm not sure, but I'm still hanging around waiting for him. Says the Brisker Rav, that's because you need to know how to read the Rambam. The Rambam doesn't ask questions and the Rambam doesn't give answers. You have to go to the Yad HaChazaka. In the Yad HaChazaka, the Rambam formulates, Mi she'enoi mamin bai. If you don't believe in the concept of Mashiach, oi! I just spoke in the Yekish community in Zurich. So there they don't say oi, it's ow! Mi she'enoi mechake b'biyasoi. If somebody doesn't believe in the coming of Mashiach, or somebody doesn't await his coming, says the Brisker Rav, the Rambam is not asking a question. The Rambam is articulating two distinct principles of faith. Principle number one, a Yid must believe in the coming of Mashiach. Principle number two, it's not enough to believe in Mashiach. You have to actively await his coming. And then the Rambam concludes, Mi she'enoi mamin boi, or mi she'enoi mechake l'biyasai. Loi b'shar neviim bilvadu koifer, ela b'toiras Moshe Rabbeinu. The Rambam says, if you don't believe in Mashiach, or you don't actively await his coming, you're a koifer not only in the Nevi'im, but in the Chumash. Koifer in the Chumash? Where in the Chumash does it say, I need to actively await the coming of Mashiach? You tell me. Bereshis? Where is it? With the Nachash? It's in Maisa Kairach? Could somebody tell me? Where in the Chumash does it say you have to actively await the coming of Mashiach? Well, says the Brisker Rav, Divrei Torah, Aniyim b'makom echad, v'ashirim b'makom acher. The words of Torah are what we call sparse in some places and rich in other places. The Rambam derived that one is a koifer in the Torah if they don't actively await the coming of Mashiach from a pasuk in Parashas Balak, which can only be understood through a pasuk in Hosea. Okay? Para Gimel, pasuk Yirches. Hosea, Gimel Yirches. You ready for this pasuk? Pasuk says, Va'ehi lohem k'moy shachal, kinomer b'derech Ashur. I will be to them like a lion, like a leopard on the way. Ashur. Where's Ashur? Assyria. Assyria. Assyria is not in Brooklyn. Assyria is in the Middle East. The pasuk says, I will be to them like a lion, like a leopard, b'derech Ashur. But says Rashi, wait a second, Ashur. Every time in Tanakh the word Ashur appears, there's a dot in the shin. In this time, in this instance, there's no dot in the shin. Says Rashi, that's because the word Ashur here does not refer to Assyria. Ashur means something else. Like in the pasuk, Ashurenu v'layata, Erenu v'layata, Ashurenu v'lay karayv. Erenu, I see it, v'lay ata, but not now. Ashurenu, I wait in ambush for it, v'lay karayv, even though it's not close. Rashi in Hosea is saying, the pasuk, va'ehi lohem k'moy shachal, I will be to them like a lion, k'nomer like a leopard, b'derech on the road, Ashur, not Assyria. Ashur means I wait in ambush. Like in the pasuk, Ashurenu v'loy karoiv. Says the Brisker Rav, this Rashi in Hosea has revealed to Klal Yisrael the source in the Torah that it's not enough to believe in the coming of Mashiach. You have to be waiting in ambush for his arrival. You need to wake up in the morning, open your eyes, wash negel vaser, and say, Ribono Shel Olam, I am doing tshuva now because I'm being meichin myself in case Mashiach comes today. That is how you have to wake up in the morning. You have to prepare and wait in ambush for Mashiach. Where does it say that? Ashurenu v'loy karayv. Ashurenu means not I see him, but not close. You know, if you learn Parshas Balak, Chumash Rashi, you would teach the pasuk, Ashurenu v'loy karayv, I see Mashiach, even though it's not close. But now that we have Rashi and Hosea, now we know the real teach of the pasuk is, Ashurenu, I wait in ambush for Mashiach, even though it's not close. So the source in the so here you have a yid. Every day he says, Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema. And he believes in Mashiach b'leiv shalom. So you say, Rabbi Yid, what are you up to? What am I up to? I go to work every day. I go to shiurim every day. No, and what about Mashiach? Yeah, what about it? Let me know when it's here. I don't have time to occupy myself. I believe in it. I'm not waiting for it. Says the Rambam, Loi b'shar neviim bilvad hu koifer, ela b'toiras Moshe Rabbeinu hu koifer. The Rambam calls that kfira. But there's another possible source for the obligation to be mitzapa l'Yeshua. There's an amazing smak. The smak, Sefer Mitzvos Katan, of Rabbi Yitzchak of Korbil, who's nifter in 1280. The smak is one of the Moinei HaMitzvos. The Rambam compiled 613, the Ramban, the Bahag, the smak. The smak in the very first mitzvah in the Torah. The mitzvah of Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hoitzeisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. Actually, I mentioned I was in Zurich. When I was in yeshiva, back in the day, they had a big edition of the smak. On the bottom of the smak, they had something called Smak Zurich. I don't know what that is. Smak Zurich. I remember seeing Smak Zurich. There were notes on the smak. So when I was in Zurich, they told me they just found the house of the smak Zurich. I said, really? That? Yeah. So what does this mean? The Chida writes in the Shem HaGdolim that the smak wanted his sefer to be the official codex of Klal Yisrael. So he printed the smak. He sent it to every single community in Klal Yisrael. And he ordered that every community pay for his edition, so that if Yidden need to know halacha, they go to the shul and they open up the smak. The problem is, not every single word of the smak was uniformly observed in every community. So every community had their version of the smak with the hagois of the rav of that community. So in Zurich, the smak, Zurich, he's called the smak Zurich because he wrote hagois on the smak. He himself was a Rishon, And he wrote on the first mitzvah of the Smak, you ready for this? The Smak writes, the mitzvah to believe that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim is just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim and redeemed us from Egypt. We are likewise commanded to yearn and anticipate that Hashem is going to take us out of Flatbush. You know that Flatbush is a gullus. It's a gullus. There's Torah, there's Shiurim, but it's a dark, bitter gullus. And one day the Ribbon Shem is going to take us out of here. That obligation to yearn for the coming of the Geula is the first mitzvah in the Torah. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzesicha me'eretz Mitzrayim. If the Ribbon Shem took us out of Mitzrayim, then he's going to take us out of Galus America. It's the first mitzvah in the Torah. Says that Smak Tzurich. Where did the Smak get this from? He said, because what does Hashem want from us? He says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm Hashem who took you out of Mitzrayim. Okay, now, so what do you want me to do about that? Can you imagine? The Ribbon Shem comes to Klal Yisrael, and the first message is, I'm the Almighty, I took you out of Egypt. Okay, so that's nice to know. What are you telling me? The Smak learns what Hashem was telling Klal Yisrael in the very first communication of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Knesset Yisrael is, I took you out of Mitzrayim, and therefore in the future when you're in Golus you need to yearn that I'm going to do it again. That is the first mitzvah in Torah Seinu HaKadosha. So I want to share with you a Chidush Noira. It's such a big Chidush, and it's so simple at the same time. So that means the Smak learns that part of remembering that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim is yearning for the Geula. I'm sure we're all familiar with probably the most well-known comments of the Ramban in Chumash. The Ramban in the end of Parshas Boy, Ramban wants to know, why are there so many mitzvahs that are Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim? So you wake up in the morning and you remember Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim in Kriya Shema. And then you remember in Emes V'Yatziv, in Emes V'Emunah. And then you walk out the door and you see the mezuzah, and the mezuzah reminds you that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. And then you put on a four-cornered garment, and you put tzitzis on, and Rashi brings from Rav Moshe Darshan that tzitzis reminds us of Makas B'chayros, Yetzias Mitzrayim. And then if you still might forget, you take a cow, you slice it up, you make straps, and you limit the circulation in your left arm to remember that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Because it wasn't enough what you did already. It wasn't enough that you put on tzitzis. It wasn't enough that you saw on the doorpost. It wasn't enough that you said it. And if you still might forget, you take a silver goblet Friday night, you pour in wine, and you announce to your family, Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. But I think you're still going to forget. So therefore, 7 days a year, you can't eat pizza. Can you imagine such a thing? 7 days a year, no bread, no pasta, no pizza. Why? In order to remember that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. But you still might forget. So another 7 days a year, you're going to leave your house and sit in a hut, and you're going to say, I'm doing this Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. So Rabban wants to know, enough already. How many reminders do you need? Imagine if somebody reminded you something like that so many times. Enough! How many reminders do you need already? Says Ramban, they're not enough reminders. Because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu took Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, he demonstrated all of the tenets of Judaism. The Rebbeinu Shem demonstrated all of the principles of the Torah. That Hashem's reality, Hashem's Metzios, that Hashem is all-knowing, that Hashem controls the world, that Hashem communicates with the Navi. All the principles of the Torah were demonstrated with Yetzias Mitzrayim. And therefore, lest we forget the events of Yetzias Mitzrayim, which are the foundation of the whole Torah, Hashem says you can never forget it. So I want you to wear a four-cornered garment and tie strings on it. I want you to say it every morning and every night. I want you to, every doorway you walk through, you're going to be hit by the mezuzah, and you're going to remember I took you out of Mitzrayim. And you're going to wrap it on your arms. And you're going to announce it Friday night. And you're not going to eat chametz on Pesach. And you're going to go sit in the sukkah so that you remember your whole life all the events of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So let's just make one simple equation. If you go back to, like 10th grade mathematics, there's something called the chain rule. if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? One simple idea. If part of remembering Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim is yearning for the Geula, and we're surrounded with mitzvahs the entire day to remember Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, do you know what that means? That means as you're wrapping your tefillin, one of the main kavanas to have, aside from the Bach, the Bach says when you put on tefillin, you need to think, I'm putting on tefillin, Lamantia toiras Hashem beficha kibyar chazako itziacha Hashem eretz Mitzrayim. One of the main kavanas to have is I'm putting on tefillin to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim, which then means one of the main kavanas to have when you put on tefillin is that I'm putting on tefillin, Rebbeinu Hashem, I'm yearning for you to redeem Klal Yisrael. Because part of Yitzias Mitzrayim is yearning for the Geula. I want to ask you a personal question. Do you go through doors? Do you ever walk through a door? Let's say when you leave this shul tonight, you're jumping out the window or you're going to go through the door? You could tell me. We're friends over here. I'm presuming you're going to go through the door. You know that on the door there's a mezuzah? You ever hear it? There's a mezuzah on the door. Stop kissing the mezuzah, please, unless you first do this. Everyone's busy kissing the mezuzah. Where does it say you have to kiss the mezuzah? I'll tell you what it does say. The purpose of mezuzah is to remember Hashem took you out of Mitzrayim, which means every door you go through is an opportunity to remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim and to yearn for the coming of the Geula. When was the last time you walked through a door and you said, Ribbono Shel Olam, when are you going to redeem Klal Yisrael? That's the purpose of the mezuzah. He doesn't need your kiss. He loves you too. But that's not the purpose of the mezuzah, to kiss it. Even though tonight's the yard set of the Ari, it comes from the Ari, it's not in Shulchan Aruch. But to walk through a door with a mezuzah and not to stop for a moment and think, this is an opportunity to be Mekayim, one of the main avenues of Avodas Hashem in this world. It's bigger than a mitzvah. A mitzvah, they're not going to ask you, did you do this mitzvah? Ultimately, they'll ask you, but it's not one of the big six. Every door, how many doors do you go through a day? 100? That's a lot of doors in a year. That's a lot of opportunities to be mitzapel Yeshua. That means from the moment you wake up in the morning and you put on tzitzis, and you remember Makas B'chayros, which means I remember to yearn for the Geula. And when I put on the tefillin, I'm thinking, Lamantia toiras Hashem beficha kibiyar chazako itziacha me'eretz Mitzrayim, and I'm yearning for the Geula. And when I say Anoichi Hashem Elokecha asher itzeisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim, and the Rebbeinu Hashem is going to be redeem us. You know how many times in davening we have an opportunity to be mitzapel Yeshua? On your way out, you could take, as you buy the Sefer Tzipis Yeshua, Rabbi Bold said to this, I'm not saying that you have to, Rabbi Bold said you have to, right? You could take a free bookmark. You know how many opportunities there are in davening to Mitzapel Yeshua? Starting from the beginning of davening. You say the Parshas HaTamid. Parshas HaTamid is Kamad Chiyuv. If you don't have time to say Karbanos, at the very least you have to say Parshas HaTamid. Shulchan Aruch Rav says it's Kamad Chiyuv. You say Yehi Ratzon, Sheyibane Beis HaMikdash B'mhera V'yameinu. It's an opportunity to Mitzapel Yeshua at the end of Rabbi Shmuel Omer. Yehi Ratzon, Sheyibane Beis HaMikdash B'mhera V'yameinu. What are we doing when we say Kaddish? Yiskadel v'yiskadesh Shemei Rabbah. We're davening the Rebbeinu Shem's great name should be magnified with the coming of the Geula. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir v'nizkeh chulanu mehira li'oiroi. In Ava Rabbah v'abienu l'sholem me'arba kanfoi sa'aretz. Baruch Ato Hashem Goyal Yisrael. Baruch Ato Hashem Mekabitz Nidchei Amo Yisrael. Baruch Ato Hashem Boinei Yerushalayim. Kili Shuascha Kivinu Kol Hayom V'sachazeno Einenu B'shuv. Is it possible you could go through 100 pages of the Siddur and at least you should be able to walk out of the shul in the morning and think to yourself, I was mitzapel Yeshua a good 24 times. So that you're ready, that you know that after 120, when they open up the book to ask you, Kavati itim l'Torah, Asakta Nasasav Nasatu Amuna. Okay, the next one we know. Forget the next one. We'll jump to the fourth one. They're not even going to ask you. You know, the Chafetz Chaim said there's a narrative in the Chumash that he's been thinking about his whole life. He can't understand it. He doesn't understand why it's in the Chumash. There's an old man. You may have heard of him. His name is Avraham. He's really old. Not only is he infertile, Chazal say, Toichein ve'enoi poilei. He's married to a lady, Sarah. Sarah's not Nakara. Sarah's an islandess, the Gemara Nivama says. And Avraham Avinu had a milah, and 3 of the cousins, they come to visit him. And they say, good news, guess what, Avraham? This year, next time this year, you're going to have a baby. Avraham laughs in joy. Sarah laughs incredulously. That should be the end of the story. You know what? We don't even need to know that Sarah laughed. Why do we need to know that Sarah laughed? But then the story continues. Hashem comes to Avraham, and Hashem says to Avraham, Lama zeh tzachaka Sarah. Why'd the lady laugh? Why'd she laugh? Why is Hashem, meddling in the marriage over here? If you would go over to a husband and start criticizing the wife, that's not usually a good idea. And the Rebbeinu Shalom comes to Avram. Why'd she laugh? So Avram Avinu doesn't say, she's a good lady, leave her alone, she's old, she's sick, don't bother her, she's had a hard day. Avraham then takes the message of Hashem and he tells her, lady, why'd you laugh? And it doesn't say Sarah turned white and Sarah was embarrassed. You know what Sarah did? I didn't laugh. What are you talking about? Why are you criticizing me? I didn't laugh. Sarah said, I didn't laugh. Lo yitzachakti. Vatoimer Sarah, lo yitzachakti. I didn't laugh. So what would a typical husband do? Okay, sorry, you're right. You didn't laugh. You didn't laugh. You're right. And scratch it. I never said anything. Avraham said, no. Ki tzachakt. You're a liar. You laughed. You laughed. By the way, Rashi says that Avraham was tafel to Sarah benavius. Really? If Avraham was tafel to Sarah benavius, could anybody even name one word in the Torah that Hashem told Sarah? Hashem's constantly talking to Avraham, and if Sarah was a greater Neviah, how come you don't find any communication between the Rebbeinu Shalom and Sarah? You do, this says in Netziv. The words, ki tzachakt, no, you laughed, are the words of the Rebbeinu Shalom to Sarah. God came to Sarah and said, lady, you laughed. Don't tell him you didn't laugh. I saw. Hashem came to Sarah and said, ki tzachakt. Says the Chafetz Chaim in his 20th letter, I cannot understand what this story is doing in the Chumash. It's a covet for Sarah that we need to know she laughed. And once she said she didn't laugh, that Avram says, no, you did laugh. And then Hashem should say, you did laugh. Says the Chafetz Chaim, this is a critical story in the Chumash. The story of Avraham and Sarah is the story of the Jewish people in the end of days. Because in the end of days, the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to come and he's going to redeem Klal Yisrael. But he's going to ask us a question. He's going to say, you didn't really think it would happen, right? You didn't really think it would happen. I know you said Ani Mamins, but you didn't really think it would. You were laughing, Hashem's going to say. You were laughing! And we, like Sarah Yimenu, are going to say, we didn't laugh. What are you talking about? We went to Shiurim, we said Ani Mamins, we sang songs. We weren't laughing, we believed! And Hashem's going to say, give me a break. You were laughing. You weren't really waiting. Says the Chafetz Chaim, therefore it behooves us now, before Mashiach comes, to prepare ourselves, to take it, to focus on it, to pay attention to all the opportunities we have. We say in the davening, Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayom. We're not mitzapa lishua just when we say those words. It's the entire day. Almost every mitzvah we do is an opportunity to mitzapa Yeshua. Every doorway we walk through, every mezuzah we encounter, every time we put on tefillin, every time we say Kriya Shema. Literally dozens and dozens and dozens of times throughout the day, we have opportunities to be mitzapa Yeshua. So when we say Ki Lishuasa, the biggest one of all, imagine if there was an appeal. So they were having an appeal for the shul. And they say, what are you going to give? Ruvain, $100. Shimon, $1,000. Levi gets up and he says, I swear. And he invokes the Shem Havaya and he invokes the Shem Elohim. I'm going to give $1 million to the Beis Medrash. Whoa. This guy better make good on his word. Can you imagine? He stood up. He stood up and he invoked two names of Hashem and he said he's going to give the money to Beis Medrash. That guy better make good on his word. Says the Chafetz Chaim, every single tefillah, we make the following declaration. Al kain nekave lecha, Hashem Elokeinu. Therefore, we are waiting. We say the Shem Havaya. We say the Shem Elohim. And we pledge, we declare in the shul, in front of the Aron Kodesh, that we're waiting for the Geula. Says the Chafetz Chaim, you better mean what you say if you're going to be invoking the names of Hashem. Heaven forbid to say empty words and say, Al kain nekave lecha, Hashem Elokeinu, lirois mehera b'Tiferes uzecha. There's a very challenging question. How could you daven for anything? Imagine somebody makes X dollars a year, and he comes, Ribbono Shel Olam, Borech Aleinu es Hashana Hazois. Ribbono Shel Olam, I think you should give me a raise. I'm making $100,000 a year. I think I should make $200,000 a year. Ribbono Shel Olam, give me $200,000. So, are you allowed to do that? Didn't Hashem already make a calculation? Does Hashem have the money to give you? He has the money. So why isn't he giving it to you? Because he knows it's not good for you. So who are you to ask Hashem, give me the money? So you're saying, Ribbono Shel Olam, I know you think it's not good for me. I respectfully disagree with you, Hashem. I think it is good for me to have extra parnasa. How do you daven? How does davening work? The Nefesh HaChaim asked this question. Nefesh HaChaim says, you can't ask that way. You can't ask Hashem, give me more, give me refuah. Hashem knows, Hashem's able to give, but he's decided and he knows that it's better for you not to have it. So you're going to ask for it anyway? You're going to say you disagree with him? So Nefesh HaChaim says, here's how tefillah works. The Ribbono Shel Olam knows that it's good for you not to have the extra money. But it hurts Hashem that you don't have the extra money. Because he loves you even more than you love yourself. So even though it's better for you not to have it, it's better for Hashem that you do have it. So you turn around and you say, Ribbono d'Alma Kula, I love you so much. I know for my benefit, you're giving me a shvacha parnasa. But I'm moichel toivas. I'm moichel you. It's okay if you give me more money because I know for you, it's better that I have the money. That is the process of tefillah. The only way to daven is for the sake of Hashem. Otherwise you can't daven. That's why the Nefesh HaChaim says, on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, all the tefillahs are for the honor of Hashem. That sets the mechanism of tefillah. In the beginning of the year we say we're davening for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then every other tefillah throughout the rest of the year we say Rafa'enu, ditto Rosh Hashanah, see Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur when I daven for your honor. You could only daven for the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the only way tefillah works. So the Kloisenberger Rebbe would say, when the Kloisenberger Rebbe was in Auschwitz, he would say, Gam ki elech begeit salmaves, even if I walk in the valley of death. Lo ira, I'm not afraid, Ribbono Shel Olam. Nothing to be afraid of. Whatever is happening to me, I should be afraid. It's for my benefit. It's for my good. I know you love me. Ra! But it hurts me. What hurts me is, ki ata imadi. it's good for me to be here. But it hurts me so much that you have to suffer here with me. For me it's good, but I know you're hurting for me. Ki ata imadi, that's what's ra. Says Ari, the kavana of Esemach David is ki lishu'ascha kivinu kol hayom. We're not davening for the Geula for ourselves. We're not even so sure the Geula is good for us. I'm saying it nicely. We are sure whether the Geula is good for us. It's not. The Gemara says the days of Geula are yomim asher ein bohem chayfetz. It's not necessarily good for our own personal avodas Hashem. It's better for us in the Galus. What are we doing here? We're here to do mitzvahs and to get reward. You can only get reward in the Galus. Once Mashiach comes, everyone's going to jump on the bandwagon. It's going to be easy to serve Hashem. Our reward is going to be mitigated. Mashiach is not for us. Not for our benefit. We say, Ein lanu chayfetz, Rebbeinu. It's not good for us. We're davening for Mashiach, ki lishu'ascha, it's for your benefit. That's how the Kloisenberger Rebbe was mispalel. Lo ira, I'm not afraid of anything, but ra, ki ato yimadi. Perhaps you had the privilege to meet my grandfather, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, who spent the last years of his life here in Brooklyn. He passed away at 106 years old. He was a Talmud Muvak of Menachem Zemba. And he would say, every day he was in Auschwitz, he believed be'emunah shalema that Mashiach was coming that day. You know, we talk about Mashiach. My grandfather waited Mashiach like it was a reality. You know, you order something, and they say it's coming either Monday or Tuesday, and the doorbell rings, and you run to the door, because, you know, it might be it. That's how he awaited the coming of Mashiach. So the Chafetz Chaim wrote the Sefer Tzipisa Yeshua, and it's amazing, he wrote it about in the year 1911. The Chafetz Chaim could not publish the Sefer in his lifetime because of censorship. You know, you say censorship? I'll just give you an example. When the Chafetz Chaim was dealing with the censor, by the way, was a Jew, was a Yid. He was a maskil. The censor of Sefer Chafetz Chaim was the son-in-law of the chief of all the maskilim. The chief maskil in Lithuania was Adam HaKohen Levinson, who, when the Chafetz Chaim was a young boy, was lurking in the Beis Medrash to try to ensnare the Chafetz Chaim and get him to go to the seminar. And he would strike up the Chafetz Chaim an hour-long conversation until a water carrier went to the Chafetz Chaim. He said, Yisrael Meir, what are you talking to this guy? He's a flagrant violator of halacha. And it's a good thing the Chafetz Chaim didn't say, I'm not listening to Lashon Hara. The Chafetz Chaim listened. I can't tell you if he was Makabel, but he ran out of Vilna, never again to go back to Vilna. Years later, the Chafetz Chaim meets up with this guy, Adam HaKohen Levinson's son-in-law, Joshua Steinberg. By the way, the Chafetz Chaim put a klala on Levinson that he should not have any Jewish descendants, and he doesn't have any Jewish descendants. He meets up with the son-in-law, Joshua Steinberg, and Joshua Steinberg, he's hake ashinov. He's so upset that his shver let this young boy get out of his grasp, and the Chafetz Chaim let it slip out of his mouth. He said, the Chafetz Chaim said, Goyim lahavdil. And this Steinberg censor said, lahavdil! All mankind are equal. How can you say lahavdil? So you could just imagine, if the censor didn't let the Chafetz Chaim say the word lahavdil, to write a sefer that the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to redeem Klal Yisrael, take them out of the Golus, and bring them back to Eretz Yisrael, there's no way that sefer would ever get through censorship, and it didn't. So there was a magazine in the time that was published between 1910 and 1915. It has the same name as the current magazine, but it's not the same thing. The Hamodia was published by a Rav in Paltava, Rev Eliyahu Akiva Rabinowitz, published a magazine, a newspaper called Hamodia. The Chafetz Chaim, like the Yated supplement, the Chafetz Chaim had to put in a little magazine called Sipisa Yeshua in the Hamodia. That was the first publication in 1911. The Chafetz Chaim had a Talmud, Yosef Meir Jacobson, who became a rabbi in Boston. He published Tzipis Yeshua, translated into Yiddish in 1921. The Chafetz Chaim's son-in-law, Aaron HaKoyen, didn't know about that publication. So Aaron HaKoyen lived in Yerushalayim, then in Tel Aviv. He republished in 1929. He writes on the title page, this is the first time Tzipis Yeshua is in print as a sefer for Klal Yisrael. But the Chafetz Chaim never published it in his lifetime. But now, in our time, it's been published many, many times. It's a critical sefer. And as important as it always has been, L'tzapos Yeshua, I think we could say now, more than ever, is this the calling of the hour. You know, for those who say the words Ahava Rabbah. What do the words Ahava Rabbah mean? Most would translate, you look in a Siddur, it's translated, with a great love Hashem loved us. Reb Schwab writes, the word Rabbah does not mean great. Rabbah means ever increasing. Reb Schwab says, the Rebbeinu Shalom's love for Klal Yisrael is ever increasing. You know, if you were to ask, who does Hashem love more? Achroinim? Rishonim? The Elta Zaydas? The Zaydas? Us? Our children? Who does Rebbeinu Shalom love more? The old generations or our generation? Says Reb Schwab, as much as Hashem loved Klal Yisrael 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, as much as Hashem loved our grandparents, as much as Hashem loved us yesterday, Hashem loves every Yid more today. And as much as Hashem loves you today, Hashem's going to love you more tomorrow. So if Mashiach didn't come today, you have such a greater chance of making it happen tomorrow. Because Hashem's love for us is Ahava Rabbah Ahavtanu Hashem Elokeinu. So we all be zoicha for Hashem to makabel all of our tefillos and all of our mitzvahs. The Chida writes, Es tzemach David Avdecha Mehira Satzmiach, in what merit? Merely in the merit of Ki Lishuascha Kivinu Kalayim is enough of a zechus for the Geula to happen. Bezos Hashem, the Medrash tells us, the Geula is born on Tisha B'Av. May we be zoicha this Tisha B'Av to see the Sechazena Einenu B'Shuvcha Tzion Barachmim. Thank you very much.
Amen. Amen.
Shem Hagen Shir Terem, Mrs. Boston, I'd like to welcome everyone. I'm sorry, I'd like to give a big yeshikayach to Rav Glatstein for tonight's drasha. Based on the news, what's that? Outside the news forum of the new Sefer of Tzipis Yeshua from Glatstein, as well as his previous Sefer on Menachem Av, is available on the table near the door. I'd like to give a big yeshikayach to the sponsor, the exclusive sponsor of tonight's Shir Beilam Shem, Lili Neshomes, Gershon Yosef ben Ramzev, Yeshua ben Yitzchak, Yitzchak ben Yeshua, Yosef Yitzchak ben Rabbi Yisrael, David ben Shlomo, Shlomo ben Moshe, Baruch Yaakov Yisrael ben Chaim Muri ben Yaakov Yisrael, Chaya bas Gershon Yosef, Yenta bas Meirsim, Esther bas Chaim HaKohen, Rivka Miriam bas Chaim Yitzchak, Yitamil bas David, Yechevet bas Chaim Yitzchak, Rachamiro bas Chaim Yitzchak, Yecheskel David ben Yaakov Tzvi, and Rabbi Shazeli ben Rabbi Vigda from Mishpachas Wolf, Alem Mashalem, Tenish Masem, Chus B'Sar Chaim. To have the great schus of sponsoring a shir or putting an ad in the dinner journal to support the Abotzas HaTorah of Yearning For All worldwide throughout the year, call 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. From Chananya ben Akash, Baruch Hu Lezakis, as a sort of very Himmelum Torah Mitzvah Shenem Al Enoch Chofetz,